right. Welcome everyone to Paperboy Ventures Ep.8. This is going to be a fun one today, a little bit different. I'm jazzed to welcome Jeremy Kim to the show. Jeremy is I'll say a media personality slash entrepreneur. He goes by the handle Jeremy Kim Kardashian on Instagram. He's the host of the popular podcast Under the Influence, and he's the co-founder and CMO of Nectar Hard Seltzer. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Kyle. And I also wanted to shout you out. What you're doing is extremely cool, especially putting on, brands in this space that are doing something interesting. So I'm honored to be here.
Amazing. Yeah, really, really excited about this convo. So we'll jump right into it. But yeah, we are here today to talk about Nectar Hard Seltzer. And I'm going to start with just reading one line that I actually picked up from your LinkedIn page. And I'd like you to react to this and tell me how this whole thing got started. Under Nectar Hard Seltzer, it says, "We are an aspiring K-pop group that sells Asian flavored sparkling alcohol juice to fund our dreams." So there's a lot in that sentence. Love to hear you unpack it.
Yeah, well, so all of that is a joke, but I think that kind of aligns to just the personality of our brand. I think it's extremely irreverent, cheeky, and if you go look at any of our social media posts, you see in the early days it was like the four of us. It was me, my two co-founders, and one of my friends from high school that was helping us grow Nectar out of my garage, and we were wearing these like colorful wigs. And it was funny because one day a lady on the street is like, we were just filming like goofy TikTok videos, dancing in front of the camera. And she's like, "What is it that you do?" And one of my friends was like, "Oh, we're a K-pop group." And then I just kind of like rode with that. But, the I would say that line specific, like ultimately, all we do is we sell Asian flavored hard seltzer, but we've done it in a way where it's all about entertaining our audience and just good storytelling. Because I think the days of just running ads and crossing your finger and hoping that you sell product is gone. And I think that content to commerce is, well, one, audience is getting smarter. You can't just shove something down their throat and hope that they buy it. That you have to build authenticity and find a way for them to connect. And we do that through entertainment and just entertainment and building good community. And then two, I think that you just got to get smarter. Like there's just so much noise out there. To capture anybody's attention requires thinking outside the box. And a brand that I think anybody can liken to is obviously Red Bull, which you're very familiar with. They did it the best. They were the pioneers of that. And then I would say, even in today's modern age, Liquid Death is another name that everyone's probably familiar with, how they're doing it differently. And I would say that we fall in that same kind of category where we're using entertainment and content to build our audience and community, which eventually drives the sales.
Absolutely. And the content to commerce moniker, I think, is a perfect way to put it. And you do see a lot of brands that are running in that direction. And we'll get to it. I want to talk to how you're building on short form video in TikTok and IG, and also how you're using text to drive sales, I think is super interesting. Before we get there, back to when you were in the garage, you had the wigs. So like, where did this idea really hit for you, and why hard seltzer in such a I'll say congested competitive category?
Yeah, so actually, prior to this, I was in the music industry and I was growing artists, and I never had like a form. Like I went to college, but it was for anthropology, and I had a 2.4 GPA. So clearly, you could tell how committed I was to that. So I didn't have a formal business education. Like I didn't know what EBITDA or like what a CEO versus a COO meant. But in the music industry, we were growing artists, literally finding kids in their bedrooms, and many of them we were able to scale them to multi-million-dollar international touring acts. Some of them were nominated for Grammys, big things like that. And what I really learned from that was, how do you get somebody to care? Because every artist out there is trying to make it big. How do you get a community to care? How do you build story and build up that hype? And ultimately, how do you get people to care, like, for the long term, right? And literally, and I also learned branding, packaging, project management, all of that. And I think that So really how the idea started is one of my best buddies from college while I was in the music industry, he was building a craft brewery with his dad in New Jersey. And this is in 2019. And he calls me one day, and we would always just be catching up here. And there are two different worlds. I never thought about CPG. I didn't even know what CPG stood for. And he hits me up one day, and there's panic in his voice. And he's like, dude, hard seltzer's killing craft beer. And I was like, so who cares? And he was like, I got to figure out a pivot for my family's business. And I was like, okay, like I'm good at marketing. Let me see if I can throw you some ideas. And the thing that we noticed right away is we built this spreadsheet, and I was like, okay, what are the competitors out there? And I started just Googling White Claw, Truly, Smirnoff, whoever it was. And then I started listing like what are the common features or what are they selling? And we noticed something right away. Everybody was making lime, berry, cherry, grapefruit over and over and over again. And I call him back and I was like, wait a second. So you're telling me that they just all make the same flavors and they're all making hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars? He was like, yeah. I'm like, okay, what else? Like, what do they do differently? He was like, that's it. I was like, what do you mean that's it? Like, do they have like a cool celebrity? Like, what's the content they make? And I quickly go to their Instagrams, and it's the worst thing I've ever seen, right? It's someone holding the can, a picture of the can, an influencer holding the can, telling you buy this can over and over and over again. And I was like, if I did that in the music industry, your career's over before it even started. If I was a music artist and every day I went on Instagram and I posted a picture of my album cover and I said, buy this, buy this, buy this, listen to this, listen to this, you're done. We had to create worlds for people to fall in love with. And so at that moment was when it hit in my brain, and I was like, wait a second, this can be disruptive, right? I just grew up like also with a music artist. We weren't able to go to our parents and be like, hey, would you like to invest in this artist's career for 10%? They'd be like, go get a real job. So we got really good at using the internet to growth hack audience, right? How do you get in front of many people? At the time, it was Vine, it was music blogs, it was Facebook video, YouTube, whatever it was. So I got really good at digital marketing. So when I saw that these companies were making that much money not doing any kind of differentiation and not really entertaining me in any kind of way, I was like, I think that there's a real opportunity here. I was very naive, just for the audience to hear. I was very naive, and obviously I learned a lot of painful lessons. But the second thing is, if I'm Korean, and right away I was like, wait a second, we have some of the best tasting fruits. We love to drink, but the biggest signal for me, and it was the combination of these big brands don't know what they're doing marketing on top of this key thing, was that Asians were suddenly becoming cool in America. And this is around 2019. The coolest moment that we had in me growing up in California was Jeremy Lin. But in 2019, it all of a sudden hit like crazy. It was BTS, Squid Game, Shang-Chi. It was like
Parasite.
Chloe Kim, Parasite. Anybody could name something. And all of a sudden, I saw all my friends of all races, all genders, all cultures, eating the food that I grew up with. It's like, wait a second, you like kimchi? Like, and so it was boba, it was ramen, it was juices. So right then and there, I was like, oh, like this is a culture wave, and this is definitely bigger than just hard seltzer. This is more of like a cultural representation, and there's nobody in the alcohol category representing modern Asian modern Asian alcohol. When you think of Asian alcohol, you think of Sapporo, Height General. When you go to have sushi, you drink an Asian beer. But other than that, there was when you look at the alcohol shelf or who are the big players, you never see like an Asian player that's doing cool things. And so those were the big signals of why I was like, all right, let's go for this.
Yeah, it's an amazing story, and I think you see this time and time again in every industry. Sometimes it takes outsiders with no experience in said industry to come in with a fresh lens and kind of change things up. And clearly you've seen that from a product standpoint and a marketing standpoint. Um, Love to talk about the product for a minute here. So I know you're looking to be the Asian flavored sparkling alcohol in the market. Can you talk about what does the product lineup look like, and how does that speak to your audience?
Yeah, so right away when we tried, I was drinking hard seltzer before my co-founder called me because it was just this craze. And what I noticed right away was like, yeah, it was easy to drink, but over time they were just kind of gross. They all had this distinct metallic aftertaste. Have you tried a White Claw or Truly before?
Of course.
Do you kind of know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, there's like a sting to it. And so I was like, wait a second. why does it taste that way? Can we get rid of that? And so my co-founder, who's more of the drink side of the business, he was like, yeah, like that should be like filtration processing. So he really went in the lab and he was able to remove that. And then when basically ours tastes like sparkling water and it gives you that little kick. And so the company name is Nectar because we wanted to serve the nectar of the gods. 90 calories, 1 gram of carbs, zero sugar, and it didn't have that artificial metallic aftertaste that a lot of the brands have. And so we thought we were serving, if also alcohol, like for us, like we've kind of evolved. We're not in college anymore where we're binge drinking just to black out. It was more so like, on the weekend or the weekdays when we wanted to unwind, we wanted a drink that could serve that. So the product offering, we have 2 variety packs now, all 8 different flavors. The original variety pack is Asian pear, mandarin, lychee, yuzu, which were a lot of the flavors that I grew up eating. And that is truly a zero sugar product. We don't use any natural or fake sweeteners to sweeten it. It's just high quality extracts. So it's very light and crisp. And then the other side is because of our audience and our marketing, we have a very strong 21 to 28 drinker, and they like bolder, flavorful. So that's our paradise pack is what we call it. And that's unique combo flavors like mango melon, Li pineapple, green grape, passion fruit orange guava. And a lot of those flavors were inspired from Hawaii, which is one of our one of our early markets that really supported the brand and blew us up. So that's our homage to them. And that one we gently sweeten with monk fruit, which is monk fruit juice. And yeah, that's our second variety pack.
Yeah, great to hear. And as far as I don't want to get too deep into the product secret sauce, but with removing that aftertaste, like how are you able to do that?
Yep.
Is that from using high quality extracts? You don't have to use other like filler ingredients. What does that look like?
So I would just say a lot of the big brands, they are making their product fast, dirty, and cheap, and they're using other alcohol to make that product that way. Whereas we use very high quality brewer's yeast, and just overall higher quality ingredients, and we don't use they're basically mixing their base with another alcohol, and we do not do that process.
Yeah, I mean, it's not uncommon as any product category scales, you're going to have big players that are driving down the cost of production in exchange for a lower quality product that ultimately
Yeah.
sells more in revenue. So I think it's smart to approach it that way from a product differentiation standpoint because it's such a crowded space. You have to act wildly different, I think, to break through. In when
Also,
it Yeah, go ahead.
being from CPG, like the only thing that reigns supreme is taste. Like you could have the coolest marketing, but as soon as a customer tries it, right, like it's got to taste good. And I think that's also where we've been able to win.
It always comes back to product quality. Is the taste there to get people to come back? Because everybody in CPG loses money on acquiring the first customer. It's always, making it up over the long run. But
Yep.
that's great stuff on the product. So would love to move over to how you think about the marketing of the brand. And the first question, I saw the Under the Influence podcast, which is pretty big now and popular. Was that started alongside Nectar, or was that before the hard seltzer? Can you talk about how that came about?
Yeah. So that the podcast actually started like I think like 2 years into Nectar, and it came for a couple of reasons. One, paid ads never worked for us. We tested it lightly. It was just, and we also didn't have any money. So we started the company extremely lean. It was my co-founder. I have 2 co-founders. One's our creative director. One's my co-founder, John, who handles all the drink supply chain side of the business. He put in $20,000, and my other co-founder, Brando, put in $20,000. Everyone's probably wondering, why did you put in $20,000? I had negative money because I was from the music industry. But so with $40,000, we got to our MVP, which is very rare. Like I later found out it's like $2 million to start like a drink company is what people start with, like seed capital. But so that's how we started. But at that point, we had no more money for marketing. So this will lead into the podcast. So at the point, I saw TikTok bubbling up from my days in the music industry, and I saw it transitioning from a dancing kids app to where people were posting memes and stories, and the audience was like getting significantly older rapidly. And it was the first app in its kind where I saw that you could post a video you could have 0 followers, post a video, and overnight it could somehow catch the algorithm and get millions of views, and those were real followers. I'd never seen it before. And so over time, as we built on TikTok and we started building this audience, I started learning what worked well. And it was being able to post like TikTok, the more you post, the more it would serve the content. And I was like, but I also noticed, I was like, it would force you into a niche. So for example, if you're a cook, all you go onto a TikTok page, it's all cooking videos. You couldn't all of a sudden show your other interest of like basketball or whatever it is. The algorithm would actually punish you. And so I was like, okay, what are more repeatable methods for us to get, and for my personal page, the Nectar page, I was running out of ideas of just pushing the drink. I was like, okay, it was the same thing of what these large brands were doing on their social media. So I was like, I need to figure out a way in which we can reach more audience, and we can get them to fall in love with the brand that's not always so focused on the product. Again, the Red Bull Liquid Death model. It's like, how do you create beyond the product? It's like Red Bull, they're throwing people, from space onto Earth, and then because of that, you're like, I want to drink that drink. So I was like, how do we figure that out? And at the time, I was like, podcast is a way where you could create repeatable content. Number two, there wasn't a platform that I saw or a podcast that was really focused on Asian creators, even though we were exploding. Number three, there was all these huge Asian TikTokers that were blowing up with millions of followers for a certain skill, but I'm sure they had other stories that they could tell that no other media arm would put them on for. And then number four, I was like, podcasting was hot, but nobody was really clipping and posting to TikTok at the time. So I was like, there's space here where maybe if we just had some hot clips, we could push people. So when we thought about the podcast idea, I was like, okay, it can't just be us doing interviews. That's what Joe Rogan does. That's what Tim Ferriss does. Like, I'm not winning in that angle. So what I thought was like, how do we gamify a podcast? And at the time, Hot Ones was huge. Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the chicken wing podcast. And I was like, that one's hilarious because there's 8 wings and they progressively get hotter and you want to see the celebrity. They bring in an interesting celebrity and you want to see them get to the end. But the real magic was Sean Evans, the host. He's so magnetic. So I was like, what if we created a drinking game that was built around an interview so that the interview got crazier and crazier, and we found a hilarious host that could do it. So that's where I found Bar Chemistry. He was, at the time, he had maybe like 200,000 followers, but he was making hilarious. He was taking bartending, which is kind of like it's just, here's how you make drinks. It's pretty benign, but he's kind of has like a dirty mouth, but he was funny and witty. So I was like, what if we put him on a drinking show? And we did just that. And in the beginning, so have you ever done a power hour in college? It's 1 shot of nectar every minute for an hour.
I've done a couple, and yeah, this is, yep, bringing back some memories.
Yeah, so that was the concept of the show. And in the beginning, it worked. So we would bring on these guests, we would get plastered by the end of the interview, and it would just be like hilarity would ensue. But and then we would also get to push the drink, right? These people that had these big audience would come on, try the product, and they'd be like, "Oh, this is really good." So we'd get that natural engagement. The issue with that was our livers started just suffering because we'd have to shoot these every week. So we eventually pivoted the podcast where it's now a group discussion. We found some really cool other co-hosts. So it's a group panel of 4. And through that, though, we've built a really diehard audience that goes and supports us at retail like crazy. So yeah, that's really how the podcast was born. How do we create beyond just drink?
Yeah, it's a really creative story, and I think it kind of reeks of authenticity with what you're posting there, and then honestly, what you're posting on TikTok to people that are following the drink, the brand. And when I see it, I see you as a founder, you're running demos at Costco. I think in Hawaii, you're pitching retailers, you're in the warehouse. It's all behind the scenes, real, authentic stuff. So how do you think about that? Like showing the underbelly of the business operations. Is that kind of what you're seeing as the direction for the property, the Nectar social property, to get connection with the audience?
Yeah, so one of the early things that we realized was these story times, and that's what I noticed was working on TikTok. People would be like, "Story time, this is how I built my business, whatever it is." I was like, "Oh, like you could tell a story. I'm really good at this because we told stories for music artists in my past." So I was like, "Why don't we start sharing?" And also, once I dove into the CPG world, the things that were happening to us dishonest co-packers, supply chain issues, launching in the middle of the pandemic. I was like, why isn't anybody like, I'm like, if I'm going through this, what are other businesses going through? Why is nobody sharing this? Right? I'm like, this seems interesting to me. And so when we would post those videos and we were very vulnerable, showing our mistakes, showing how we almost failed, like all these things, that was what would go so ballistic on TikTok. And so I was like, okay, like this is it. So then first it went from recording things that would happen and then telling the story after to then I was like, what if I told it in real time? So that it's not 2 months later people are hearing about this. It's like people can actually see, and it's almost like a cliffhanger. It's like a reality show that you have to tune into every single day or week, or how fast I could post. And that's really where it kind of where it blew up, because I'm like, now you have people that are tuning in, they don't know the ending, and if you could create that suspense, they're either rooting for you, they're against you. You know, there's so many times that videos go viral where people tell me I'm an idiot. There's other videos where people are like cheering me on, and I think that that is ultimately, if you can create conversation and you can have people coming back to your content over and over again, that's where you build community, and that's where you can have you can begin conversation. Something I tell a lot of other founders too is community is simply conversation with your audience, and build that over time is how it grows. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's well put, and I think to your point on why aren't people talking about this from the industry, I would say that a lot of people are numb to the operating world in consumer when they've been in it for so long. So, after watching your videos, I like your approach because you are speaking very bluntly and clearly, but at a high level to where somebody from the outside of consumer could understand what you're talking about. But it's also like a nice refresher for people who are in it to look at it and be like, wow, it actually is that crazy to deal with deductions from distributors and retailers kicking your product out and all that. So appreciate what you're doing there. The
Thank you.
other thing I think is super interesting is there's a phone number everywhere on your website, on your socials. What's the deal with that? Like, how are you using that to actually drive revenue at retail? Like, what's going on there?
So today we've sold, I think we're now at like 6.5 or 7 million cans, and we're on our fourth year of business. None of that would have happened without the phone number. None of that. And I'll explain. So I actually learned it from my artist marketing days, but like email is so difficult because everybody has a burner email. After a while, if you get spammed too many times, I'm not opening every email that I get, right? I just want the free 10% coupon, and then I'm sending you to spam or sending you some inbox that I never check. And what we realized with phone number was, one, the open rate is insane. So whether or not they care about the message, they're gonna open it and read what you send them. And then number two, it was like by having that instant, if they hit you up and you instantly reply back to them, it suddenly built like a connection. Even if it was just a slight one, they would be like, wait, there's a real person at the other end of this. And conversation ensues. And again, it goes back to kind of building community in that aspect. And so from my artist marketing days, we were blowing out venues for artists that were like a fraction of the size of what they should be selling, right? It'd be an artist that has like, you know, 5,000 followers compared to an artist that has 1 million followers, but we were selling out a venue bigger than the artist with 1 million followers because we were retaining every single person that cared. So when I started Nectar, I said, all right, screw email. Like anybody that comes into this or cares about this brand, we're going to retain their phone number. And through it, we found the right platform where we could also collect zip code data. And through that, when I would make a video and it would blast out, it would immediately flood in. People would text in whether they're curious about how to get their hands on the product or where we were going next or all the hype that we create, and we would know exactly where to go. And that helped us immensely when we would go try to expand. I would just show phone numbers to these store owners or these retailer buyers or these distributors in different territories. I'm like, look how many customers we have in a 30-mile radius of you in this city. Let me prove myself to you. Put us in one store and let us bring these customers to you. And then when they would say yes, all I had to do was pull out my phone. Hey, Nectar's coming like to your city. Where do you want us? Oh, I shop at Safeway. I shop at 7-Eleven. I would go back to the distributor. Can you please get 7-Eleven? Can you please get Safeway or whatever it is? We have 50 people that want it in this area, and so it took away a lot of the guesswork in terms of like Now I just connected the dot between customer and distributor and retailer, right? Retailer is like, oh, what are you going to do for me? Can you really sell? I don't know. Oh, okay, well, here's all these customers. You want to talk to them? This is them telling me what they want. Okay. And at first, everybody probably has some way where they scam the data to show a retailer. But for us, I would then be like, all right, let's prove it. Retailer would do it, text everybody. And with social media, if I posted about it 100 times on my Instagram, let's say I had 500 people on my phone number list, and also all those 500 were following me on Instagram. If I posted it 500 times on Instagram, I bet you the Instagram algorithm would only serve it to 10% of that audience. Whereas with phone number, everybody's reading that message. Whether or not they can make it, they're all reading it. And
Right.
and that's really how we would create those massive lines out the door. That's how we're continually being able to communicate with them. So when the algorithms and when TikTok disappears or Instagram changes their algorithm, I'm not worried because I have our core audience that we've built from day one. They're with us forever. So that's the power of phone number.
Amazing. So, and just so I have this right, you collect the
Yeah.
phone numbers, you get the zip codes, you use that as sort of a proof of concept with retailers to allow them to give you space. And then to prove it out, you text everybody. What are you hitting them with? Is this an offer? Is this like a discount code, or is it more of like a just the brand is here, go buy it? Like
Yeah.
what's working?
The brand is here, and honestly, it's been built off of hype in a lot of ways, right? Like, a lot of people has tried to cover our strategy, but they're like not able to create the line out the door, like, right? Like, why is that? And that really comes from the other aspect of the organic storytelling. Because we've documented every part of our journey, because we create these fun activations, because we create ways for people to like be involved in our brand, whether they're selecting the flavors or they're choosing the next city or they're choosing the retailer. When we achieve those goals and we say, hey, you tell us where to go. All right, if 300 people tell us where to go, we'll make it happen. And then they do, and then we make it happen. And then we record all that and then we publish it. The people in the next city are like, oh, these guys hold their word. This is cool. All right, I kind of want to try it. And then now they're participating, right? And that's how it continually builds. But there's a million ways in which you can kind of try to build hype to get someone into your store. But for us, it's just been storytelling, letting our audience literally build the brand with us, and then doing exactly what they say and executing on that promise, that circle over and over and over.
Yeah, well done. It's clearly off to a very very strong start, and looking forward to seeing where you and the team go with this in the future. So, with that, we'll lead into it. Would love to hear like what's the long-term goal for the brand? Like where I don't know if you have one, but like where do you see this thing going in 5 years plus?
Yeah. So, like I've said before, I believe content to commerce is the future. I believe that a lot of brands are hurting right now because they just thought that creating a unique product was enough, but you got to be able to build a community, and that's what we're masters at. We have this huge, vibrant community. We have this media arm that we're building, where it's a podcast. We're also diving into original content. So, long term, I see us really being kind of like a beacon for the Asian American community. And so are you familiar with Gold House?
No.
Gold House, they're like a very popular they're a very popular like Asian VC syndicate where they also have they have an incubator, they have networking, they also have a VC arm where they invest in Asian focused brands. And it's well run, but it's very clean cut, buttoned up. It's like if you graduated McKinsey, that's the Gold House. But for us, like I'm rough around the edges. Like if you look at our podcast, one of our co-hosts, he has tattoos all over his face. Like was came out of jail. At 24 years, 23 years old, and we're rough around the edges. So I liken us more to Barstool, and you'd be surprised of how many people every day come up to me that are either young Asians or my age or older, and they're like, I really like that you show the rawer side of what our culture is like because we're not, just this clean cut model minority. So when I think about like what Nectar represents as a brand or what UTI, I really believe that we are the face of we're making Asian Americans cool in a lot of ways and showing aspects of the culture that normalize us in a lot of ways. In terms of the drink side, there is no modern Asian alcohol brand. It just doesn't exist. And I believe that we'll be on the forefront of that. So next we have new product innovation coming out. And when does this drop? Maybe I could reveal it here.
In 6 days on Monday, May 13th.
Yeah, well, I'll just reveal it here. If people discover it, great, and then I'll push it too. But we're launching a hard juice, and that's going to be in we're launching that in Hawaii. And then also on top of that, we have other secret innovations that we're planning to launch in the near future as well. So we're going to move outside of the hard seltzer category, and we're just going to take different. We're going to bring modern Asian flavor. We're going to take traditional Asian flavors and push them into new categories like hard seltzers and hard juice, things like that. And we're also going to go into older Asian alcohol categories and revamp them and put our modern twist on it. So that's really the future. And long term, I want to be Red Bull maybe one day. So I do believe we have the power to be international, and that's ultimately the goal.
Yeah.
Nationwide, international.
Yeah, one step at a time, but it's it's absolutely going to be fun to watch, and I have to give you props on everything you've built so far.
Thank
I
you.
know how difficult it is. So, congrats on all the success, and we'll all be following and rooting for you along the way. So,
Amazing.
thanks for joining, Jeremy.